Get the shit together. What time is it? 8:38.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Zoom for this presentation hosted by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados and, of course, by BARP. Under the theme, Simplifying the Personal Tax Return. It's that dreaded time of the year. It's tax season, and we have a very qualified person to walk us through what you need to do for this season, 2024. We want to say good evening to Jason King from ICAB. Of course, we also want to say good evening to our president, Marilyn Rice-Bowen. And it is at this time that I am going to hand over to the president just to make a few remarks. And then I will tell you a little bit about Jason and we can get into his presentation. So, Madam President, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Dale Ford, BARP's Communications Specialist, executive and members of ICAB, Board of Directors, management, staff, and members of BARP, friends of BARP, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for allowing us into your space at home this evening. We are aware there is so many different things that you can be doing, but because taxes are important, taxes are let's say taxes are help to grease the engine to keep a country going. We thought it fitting to partner with ICAB to present Simplifying the Personal Tax Return. We are aware that some of you might need some assistance with the completion of your income tax returns. And this evening's presentation by Jason King, we are confident that all of your queries will be addressed. This evening, if you are employed, self-employed, or if you are a pensioner, this session is indeed geared towards your needs. Our theme is Healthy Aging, Aging Strong, and this evening, our focus is on financial health. I want you to encourage you all to make notes. And of course, there will be a session for Q&A. And just sit back, you're home or maybe in the office. But what's important is this evening is a day of education for you. And our focus is on your financial health. So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and again, welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I'm just going to give our members and those who are on the call some background information about Jason. He's an accountant by profession, and he has specialized in all areas of taxation for more than 20 years. He's now an independent consultant. He previously was a tax consultant with the Barbados Revenue Authority and the group tax manager for a large energy company in the Caribbean region. Additionally, he spent several years with a professional services firm in Barbados, focusing on direct and indirect tax compliance and providing tax solutions to local, regional, and international clients. He's also a member of the Certified Professional Accountants Association of Canada, the Certified Professional Accountants Association of British Columbia, and the International Fiscal Association. He is also the holder of one minute. My apologies. I had a little technical issue there. And I'm back. My apologies. He's currently the treasurer of the Barbados Cricket Association and serves as the director of the cricket franchise of Barbados Incorporated and Kensington Oval Management Incorporated, and is a director of and chairman of the Audit, Risk and Compliance Committee of Cricket West Indies Incorporated. He's also a former International Hockey Federation umpire. He's a married father of two. He has a keen interest in volunteerism and dedicates part of his life to the Barbados Boy Scouts Association as a leader and member of several committees. And he's the vice president of the Barbados Citizens Band Radio Association, and he mentors young professionals. So Jason, thank you so much for making yourself available to share this very important information with us. And I now hand over to you to start your presentation.
Hey, good evening to you, Dale. Good evening to all on this Zoom call. This is my first, I'll say very quickly, thank you for the introduction. Thank Marlon for her welcome. And this happens to be my first engagement as a new member of the Barbados Association of Retired Professionals. So I'm very happy to be here and to begin my give back to the association that I am a new member of. Taxation is always a touchy issue, and persons a lot of the time in Barbados especially only remember taxation once or twice per year. Once when they have to file, and the second time is when the refunds are due. However, I want to first of all encourage everyone to try to pay as much attention as they can to their own individual situations, what types of business you're engaged in, what's going on at your place of employment, what's going on with the institution that pays you your pension. And that's year-round activity. Because if you don't, it means then you could be rushing when it comes to the tax filing time. We are at the moment on the 11th of April, we are 19 days away from the deadline for this year, which is April 30th. And that's for individuals covering employees, pensioners, as well as those who are self-employed. Those are generally the three major categories that would be filing and paying at least part, in some cases, anything outstanding by April 30th. I'm gonna bring up a presentation which I put together to assist in guiding members through or participants through the session today. And it's called Simplifying the Personal Tax Return, because I think sometimes persons overthink the obligation to file a personal tax return. If you are informed, if you have the relevant information timely, it means that you can make the right decisions, and that applies to all facets of life, especially at this time of year, your tax return. A bit of an agenda for today, bit of introduction and background to the personal tax return, things to check before completing the tax return or attempted to complete the tax return, a brief history, some information about the personal tax return, and then take you through a bit of the actual return. I do have a few screenshots in there that would give a bit of an insight into the early parts of the return, and basically walk you through. Now, as the president said when she appeared on Morning Barbados yesterday, there will be a Q&A session. I encourage you to use the chat in case we aren't able to answer all of the questions, and we do intend to prepare responses to those questions and send that information out in due course. So in terms of an introduction and a bit of background, the requirements to file a tax return, etc., come about from the Income Tax Act, Chapter 73 of the laws of Barbados. And this legislation was first passed in 1969. The 2nd of January is when it was enacted for income years 1968 coming forward. And that sounds like a long time ago, but in the world of taxation, that's still relatively young. Within this legislation, both the administrator in this case is the Barbados Revenue Authority. It gives them the right to administer the taxes, which have been put in place by law, which means it's passed through all areas of Parliament in order to come into law within Barbados. It also gives the taxpayer certain rights, down to the point where if you have a challenge, it gives you the option of objecting to any assessments which the Barbados Revenue Authority can issue, or any determinations that could be made by the Revenue Commissioner or her representatives. There's also within there, gives the category of taxpayers. And what we're gonna concentrate on today would be employees, pensioners, and self-employed individuals. The requirement to file a tax return, if you are an employed person and above the amount of $25,000, you're required to file a return. Under that, and you are employed and you can meet certain obligations, you have the option of filing a reverse tax credit. I'm not going into the reverse tax credit today, but that is an option for those who receive salary, which at the end of the year totals less than $25,000. And as I said, there are a few other requirements in order to qualify for that reverse tax credit. In terms of the importance of filing a return, it's best for persons to do that to avoid any penalties and interest. Your returns, while for employees especially, where you have something called PAYE, pay as you earn, and there's an amount withheld from your tax, from your salary or wages on a monthly or weekly basis, that all adds up over the entire year. And it's important to file the return so you're doing a bit of a reconciliation of what you should have paid based on the income you would have made during the year, or if there is a refund due for you. Now, that PAYE is taken out on a weekly or monthly basis, as I said, based on if you have worked for an entire year. So if you work for 6 months a year, for example, each month, the calculation is done based on if you would work for 12 months. So you could imagine if you only work for 6 months, it means that likely too much tax, and you're above that threshold, too much tax has been taken out, and you will likely be in line for a refund. The only way to know that and basically apply for that refund is to file a tax return. So those are the reasons. That's one of the key reasons, and probably the key reason for filing a return, to ensure that the reconciliation is there. And also imagine if you are in a payable position, you also want to know that so that you can settle your obligation in a timely fashion to avoid any penalties and interest. You also want to file by the tax deadline, because there is a penalty for late filing, which is 500 Barbados dollars for the late filing of a return. So even if you are in a refund position and you file late, that $500 is going to hit your account as due to be paid to the Barbados Revenue Authority. So imagine if you had a refund due to you of $300 and you filed late, in effect, you will end up still owing $200, because the $500 penalty will go on despite the fact that you are in a refund position. Advantages of early filing. I know a lot of people believe that you wait until the last minute to file. I do not advise that. File as early as you can once your return is ready to be filed. Ready to be filed means that all the information that you need to be in that return is in that return, and you file the return. Filing does not mean that you have to pay at the same time. Filing early, you are in, you avoid that $500 penalty, which can be substantial. Everybody can think of what they could do with an additional $500 if you don't have to pay into the Barbados Revenue Authority because you were tardy and filed your return late. In terms of early payment, I know persons like to hold their money until the last minute. I have always been, I've always advised persons to try to at least deal with the day before. You don't want that something happens on the day of filing and you can't get it in. The Barbados Revenue Authority uses a system which will calculate penalties and interest automatically. So even if something happens, imagine your internet goes down, your computer goes down, we have a blackout, for example, then you can't get in. Unfortunately, those reasons are not likely to be good enough to convince anyone at the Barbados Revenue Authority that your penalties and or interest should be reversed. So I advise you to file early and to pay early. I remember years ago, during part of my professional career, the system at the entity which I was working got hit by a virus 2 days before the tax filing deadline. At that point in time, returns were filed using paper, but it still affected the being able to get information for clients to be able to submit timely. We were able to make it happen still because we were able to get past the virus and be able to make the tax deadline. But it was a very, very rough period. I believe that my hairline that you see right now has suffered still as a result of that issue with that virus more than 15 to 20 years ago. The importance of record keeping. Keep all of your information. In this day and age of digitalization, I would say scan what you can, take photos of what you can, and save them somewhere in a folder with a backup so that you have access to that information when you need it. You also need to retain those records for a certain amount of time because the statute of limitation for taxation is 7 years. So it means that within that 7-year period, the Barbados Revenue Authority can come to you for the purposes of auditing. And if you don't have your records, they can make a determination of whether what you have filed is accurate or not. That doesn't, of course, apply to third-party information, which remains on the system. But where you are keying information in on your own, make sure that you have those supporting records so that you don't run yourself into trouble. The last item on this slide I have is awareness of allowable revenue and expenditure items. There are some sections in the Income Tax Act, and I won't really go into those in detail, Section 8 to Section 12 initially, which talk about revenue that is taxable. Section 5 to Section 12. What is taxable and what is deductible. You need to be aware throughout the year especially for those self-employed persons, what is taxable and what is deductible. And you need to keep that information for the period as well as those subsequent periods. So this is tied very closely to the previous point of the importance of record keeping. So as you're going through the year, be aware this will be subject to tax, or that would allow me a tax deduction, and you capture the relevant information and you keep that information in a safe place. Just a brief history. I know in the agenda I had them in the opposite direction, opposite to each other. I did have information. I did have the things to check before the brief history, but in terms of the brief history, 1968, as I referred to, is when returns started, and that was manual. And those of you who are old enough, and especially, well, the members of BARP, who, I mean, that starts from age 40 now up to infinity almost, would remember the manual returns. And sometimes there were different colors. The individual tended to be white, and it required you to do all sorts of calculations. I remember with the home allowance, persons had to add up a number of different receipts and attach those to the return when they were submitting the return. I remember, for example, my parents, when it came to tax time, being up throughout the night, putting these things together in order to prepare their tax returns at the point in time. And I'm very happy that they both remain tax compliant throughout the years, because that's enabled me to come up in this environment with a good reputation. 2008, the Inland Revenue Department at the time moved towards an electronic system, which would enable them, one, to capture the information easier. It meant that they did not have to process a lot of manual documentation. It also meant that storage, physical storage, as much physical storage was not required as was done previously. Imagine if there was a taxpayer who had filed taxes from 1968 up until that 2008. That's 41 returns. 41 returns and the associated documentation, which would be on a file or several files within the Inland Revenue Department or their archives. So the move to electronic was welcomed, and there was a system called e-tax, which was in place and enabled us as taxpayers to be able to file. It also meant that the third-party information, some information would be uploaded for you and some would be pre-populated, so you wouldn't have to go through and enter every single line item. In 2018, for 2018 tax returns onwards, we've been using TAMIS. There are those who have positives to say about TAMIS and negatives to say about TAMIS. But the reality is, this is the system that is in use at the moment. And therefore, it is advisable that you understand how the system works for you. You don't need to worry about how it works for large conglomerates or anything like that. The important thing is how it works for you. And as we're looking at the personal income tax return, how it works for you and your obligation to file a personal tax return. The important parts of TAMIS to concentrate on initially are registration and getting your tax identification number, which is a 13-digit unique number which the BRA uses to identify you, the taxpayer. The registration process is relatively straightforward. You do need to get a web user, a web account, but once you go on to tamis.bra.gov.bb and you click and walk yourself through, you get to that point where you can complete the registration and you get your TIN and apply for the TIN. In recent times, TINs have been coming back relatively quickly, especially for individuals. And once you have that, that's the identifier that is used by employers, by payers of pensions, as well as entities who contract individuals, self-employed individuals, and pay them fees. Once you log in to TAMIS using your username and password, this is a screen that you see. Now, this screen can be somewhat misleading, and it's a screen that I've actually had the experience of working in another Caribbean country where the developer of TAMIS also developed the tax system within that country. And this is a page that comes up. Now it asks you you've used your username, your unique username, and your password, which is known only to you. And this comes up asking you to enter your existing password and to then create a new password. You do not need to do that on this page. I repeat, you do not need to do that on this page unless it is the first time you are logging in. And I'm not talking about the first time for the year. I'm talking about the very first time that you log in to the system with that new username and associated password. Beyond that, you can bypass this by pressing any of the tabs above. If you click the welcome tab, the returns tab, this setup of your account page will go away and you will be able to operate within TAMIS without having to make the change to the password. Imagine if every time you came in, you changed that password. It meant that people would get confused and they may not remember what their password is. One of the big holdups every single year is persons not remembering their passwords. I implore you, once you have established what your password is, try to keep it in a safe place. Getting a password reset is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. It is easy once you can reach someone at the Barbados Revenue Authority. However, in April, the officers at the Barbados Revenue Authority tend to be inundated with a lot of requests. So imagine there are thousands and thousands of taxpayers. Imagine if all of them could not remember their password and they tried to get hold of someone to do a password reset or to reissue their password. It will take up time. You will be in a queue for a very long time. So I advise you, once you have that password, keep it in a safe place. It makes it very, very simple then for you to get into your TAMIS account. Now, things to do before you start to look to file. And recently, we would have had some sessions on radio called Talking Business with ICAB. And you may have heard me speaking about third-party information and making sure that you check the third-party information. What is third-party information? Third-party information can be those PAYE uploads. PAYE uploads covers those who are employed on a monthly basis. Your employer should be uploading that employment information. I throughout the year try to get people to check it should be monthly. So by June, you should see 5 uploads for a particular year, because January to May should have been uploaded. The upload for June is not due until the 15th of July. So during the month of June, you may not see June, but check throughout the year. There are some pensions which are also paid and uploaded on a monthly basis, the information related to those. Donations to charities, both registered charities and exempt charities. The registered is there's a limit of $1 million in donations. The exempt, you get whatever the donations are. And this is information again. The charity will require your TIN. Same thing with your employee, same thing with the entity that's paying you a pension. They need that 13-digit TIN so that it can be tied to you, so that when they upload the information, it will drop into your unique account within Thomas. Donations to trade unions, same thing. The trade unions will want your TIN. Ensure you get it so that you can get that particular deduction. When it comes to business income, there's a type of upload called goods and services. These would be goods that entities or persons would acquire from individuals. So you may have ABC company contracting, and I could say Jason King, to do yard maintenance on a monthly basis. And they're paying me $1,000 per month. I'm not an employee, but I'm just to come and do that once a month to clean up their yard, whatever needs to be done. So I'm not there every day. I'm not an employee. So for my purposes, I would be self-employed. For their purposes, I would be a contractor. So therefore, they would upload information via a goods and services portal indicating what type of activity it was, simply maintenance, and the amount that was paid to me throughout the year, which $1,000 per month would be $12,000. Now, when that is uploaded, I would go into my third-party information and I would see that there. I would see that that income has been uploaded on my behalf by that entity. That applies both for goods as well as services, which have been those services provided by or goods purchased from individuals. Partnership information uploads. Now, there are persons who are engaged in business partnerships, and partnerships on their own are not taxable. What is taxable is the partners to that partnership. So there's a requirement to provide and upload with the information from the partnership. And there are some partnerships that are run like a regular business, where all the revenue comes in, all the expenses come in, and then the profits are shared among the partners. Even if those aren't shared among the partners, it is still the income for the particular year. So you need to do a return which will then indicate what portion is allocated to each individual partner. Those partners need to, there's a special part of their information, their registration information, where they need to indicate the partnership, and basically there will be a link as to who the partners are, so that when that partnership information return is done and uploaded, the relevant information will be split among the partners to that partnership. I spoke earlier about having details of business transactions for self-employed persons. I am aware of a recent situation where someone had worked for or provided services for an entity for a few months and at a particular quantum. When they went in to check their third-party information, there was more income there than they had been paid. If you have your details, as that person did, they would be able to go back to the entity and indicate that the upload was incorrect. So it's good to check these things, because it doesn't make a difference what you think as the self-employed person. Once that information is uploaded by the third party, it's the third party only that can make the adjustment. The Barbados Revenue Authority cannot make an adjustment to that third party information. It goes right back to the entity that uploaded. So you need to make sure that you check that third party information should be uploaded on an annual basis by the 28th of February, which gives you 2 months to check and make any adjustments that you can to the information so that it is correct and that you're paying taxes or calculating taxes on the correct amount of income. The BRA has, for a few years now, been asking persons to update their banking information. If you are due a refund, the BRA has indicated they are no longer issuing checks for refunds. They will be doing direct deposits to, and when I say banking, it can also be not only a commercial bank, but a credit union. So they will be making payments to financial institutions via direct deposit. It means that your information needs to be correct within the system. If not, you can have challenges because it may, and I hope not, go to the wrong account, or it may be sent off to the financial institution who may say there is no account here with that name and that account number. The details can be a difference of one number in that banking information can cause it to go the wrong place. In terms of updating the banking information, once you go into Thomas, you click on update details and you select, I wish to update my address, phone, email, or bank details. You select that and you hit next. And information comes up. This in terms of adding if you need to, or then updating if you need to. Make sure that this information is correct. Once you select the bank and the branch, the parts of the account number will be pre-populated and you just need to add the relevant amount of digits after. Make sure you understand what your bank account number is. Please do not, in this situation, so for example, on this screen, you say, oh, my account number is 010096006, and then put the 111 after that. That is not a valid account number. The 010 and the 09606 are coming before, and these would be unique identifiers for First Carib CIBC and the Broad Street branch of CIBC. You'll also need to put the bank account type, whether checking or savings. In terms of updating details, registering for one or more tax types, and that is where then you can get into the information about partnerships and other and other things like that. A cancellation of the taxpayer account means you want to cancel. You will have to give a valid reason why you want to cancel the TIN. And there are situations where persons, because of TINs being generated on persons' behalf, may end up with 2 TINs. So they may have to do a cancellation of one. And sometimes persons can request a temporary suspension of the TIN or of one or more tax types. If you, for example, were registered with a partnership and you're no longer there, you can select the cancellation of one or more tax types. This is also where you would be registering for VAT as an individual if you are above the $200,000 threshold. And you would, and where applicable, if you want to cancel because your sales or taxable supplies in that case are no longer above the threshold. But those who that is applicable to, I believe, are very aware of that. This is not information that is required for the average taxpayer. In order to check that third-party information, you need to hold your mouse above the account tab and then come down to third-party information. You click that third-party information and you get the third-party information. You will have to select the particular year. So right now it will come up as the default of 2024. You will need to click the drop-down box and select 2023 and choose search. Once you do that, you will see the information come in populated. So for example, this sample taxpayer had pension income from the National Insurance Department. There was a private pension from Sagicor Life. There was also pension income from First Caribbean. Person would also have made donations to the charity, which you see here in terms of tax type, you see CHA. That's a charitable donation to the Barbados Cancer Society and as well as the Girl Guides Association of Barbados. Both registered charities. This taxpayer would have provided their TIN to those charities so that when the charity does their upload, the information would drop straight into this section of their account. This, when I'm speaking about checking your third-party information, this is where I am advising you to go. And being aware of what you do, you would know that you would have made certain donations. So if, for example, there was a donation made here to the Barbados Boy Scouts Association, for example, that you'd made one and you're not seeing it, it's best at that point in time to check with that charity to see if they have uploaded as yet or if there is a challenge with their upload. This is also where sickness benefits and unemployment benefits would come in to your account. Unemployment benefits are taxable. Sickness benefits are taxable. The benefits listed in here are taxable. There are some persons, and I had someone up to last night say, how could you tax unemployment benefits? It's not truly a tax of unemployment benefits because if you think of unemployment benefits, those are expected to be under the $25,000 threshold and generally would not be taxable. Same thing with NIS pension. It's expected that this would be under $45,000, which is the personal allowance for pensioners. So the fact that they are taxable means that you would have other income. And there's nothing wrong with having other income because that allows you to supplement your level of expenditure and your desired lifestyle. But of course, once you go above the relevant thresholds, the tax rates the relevant tax rates will kick in. So this third-party information page is critical for you to review before you start to do your return. You can determine here, and I repeat it, if all information that needs to be here and is correct, or whether there's something missing and you need to make contact with a relevant entity or person to ensure that the information is uploaded correctly on your behalf. We're now moving into the return of itself. And again, this is the same page where you would have come in, you would have bypassed that password reset request, and you put the mouse on top of returns. You can click add return. Now, if you want to check a return from a previous period, you click on returns here, returns, hold on top of returns and click on returns. That takes you to a box where you will select the year that you want to view the returns for. In case of individuals, that would give you access to your 2018 to 2022 returns once you have submitted them. If you haven't submitted them or there was no requirement to submit them, please don't expect a miracle to have a return there in your account. So we select add return. Add return takes us to another page where we have a tax type. And we click the drop down box and you have 4 options: administrative fee, goods and services, including royalties, personal income tax, or reverse tax credit claim. The personal income tax is where we're going at this point in time. The reverse tax credit I referred to early in my presentation and said we would not concentrate on it. The goods and services I referred to with the third-party information. So if someone has done contract work for you, you would need to go to this goods and services page here and select that and complete the goods and services for that individual. Of course, you will need the 13-digit TIN belonging to that individual in order to complete that goods and services return. Once you've selected personal income tax as the tax type, there's then the option to select a year. Now, all you see on the screen there available is 2023, because this particular taxpayer has filed all of the returns available prior to 2023. If they're not, you would see from 2018 to 2023 listed under between not selected and 2023. You will also notice that you do not see 2024, 2025, or 2026. It means that at this point, you can only file up to and including income year 2023. And now that I say income year for individuals runs from January 1st to December 31st of the particular year. So 2023 is January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023, inclusive. All of the activity that took place during that 365-day period. Once you select 2023, you then have a selection here that is for annual, and the due date is the 30th of April, 2024, as I alluded to earlier. And this is the next return that is due. If you had selected a previous year's return, you would have seen in terms of status, you would have seen in red overdue. So at this point, we're not yet. We're at the 11th of April. 30th of April is coming. We're not there yet. So it's showing as next due. And you will click create return. Once you click that, you get information with details saying tax type is personal income tax. The year is 2023. Annual being for the entire year. And the return due date and the payment due dates being the same, 30th of April 2024, 30th of April 2024. And then you're asked to fill out the form accurately to the best of your knowledge, because at the end of the return, you're asked to attest to the fact that this return has been completed to the best of your knowledge. Sometimes persons make errors, but to the best of your knowledge can mean I didn't know. You may say I did not know, but it's up to you as a taxpayer to make yourself acquainted with all that is relevant to you filing your tax return. Unless, of course, it is your intention to get someone to file on your behalf or to ask for assistance from at one of the tax clinics, which the Barbados Revenue Authority is currently putting on. Once you go into the return, and the pages are quite long, so it was not easy to put them on the screen, but I did put a few on to start. So page 1 speaks about profession or occupation, and it does have a profession or occupation type there listed as retired person. So those who are strictly pensioners, there is an option there for you to select retired person. Others who are employed, you can, there's several options for you. The Barbados Revenue Authority has tried as best they can to capture all types of employment. Bartender, manager, store clerk, accountant, foreign service officer, insurance agent, all those types. They've tried attorney at law. They've tried to capture as much as they can. However, if you do not see your occupation or profession there, you have the option of selecting other and then typing in the box below that what your profession or occupation is. And then you move forward from there down the page. Marital status, single, married, divorce, separated. That's there for you to select. The marital status is important because, as was done even in the days of manual or paper filing, there is the requirement to put the name. Well, you don't need to put the name, you put the TIN, in this case now, of your spouse if you are married, because there are certain things which apply to just one household. You select that. You will also be asked later if you are filing, if your spouse has filed a return or not, or if you are submitting on their behalf. And you see here, do you wish, if you're married, state your spouse's TIN, and do you wish to claim for your spouse? So if your marital status is single, the do you wish to claim for your spouse will not be something that you have the option to select. Those will be grayed out. If you are married and you select married, you're required to enter your spouse's TIN and do you wish to claim for your spouse. Now, there is an option to make a claim of $3,000, a deduction of $3,000 for your spouse if they have not made more than, I think it's $800 for the entire year. So they're classified as a dependent, and you can make a claim, an additional $3,000 onto your personal allowance of $25,000 for that spouse. In terms of residency, to determine if for the year, if you're resident or non-resident, generally residence comes into place when you look at whether you've been in Barbados for more than 182 days. So 183 days and above. And if you think of the simple math, divide 365 by 2 to determine where you were for half the year, you get 182.5. So the 183 days or above would indicate that you were here for more than half the year and therefore resident. There are some persons who, however, are outside for a period of time, but they have not, and when I say they've not intended to be out, it means that they've still not indicated that they intend to be taxable elsewhere and wish to remain here. And a term that we use in the tax world of domiciled here, meaning that you intend you're returning every time. So there's some persons who work and are required to be out of the island on a regular basis, but they're paid in Barbados for that same work. So they would be still classified as resident in Barbados for tax purposes. Details of associated returns filed would be has the spouse filed a PIT or RTC for this year? PIT would be personal income tax return, or reverse tax credit for this year. You'll be required to indicate that. And as the taxpayer, meaning you, have you filed an reverse tax credit? You can't file both a reverse tax credit as well as a personal tax return and have both of them processed. You will not. One of them will not go into the system because you're either qualifying for that reverse tax credit or you are above the threshold and therefore subject to tax. Now, there are some persons who have not worked for an entire year and are still under the 25,000. Though some of those it would still be in their best interest to submit a personal tax return, because if you extrapolate their income over the entire year, so a person who has started out working in the latter part of a year, for example, say from August to the end of the year at $4,000 per month, they're only at 20,000 for those 5 months. They will be under the 25,000, but there would have been a significant portion of tax taken out. In order for them to get the refund, they need to file a personal tax return. If you file a reverse tax credit, you may not qualify because the tax deducted would have been above a particular threshold. And I mean, earlier I spoke to and trying not to go into the reverse tax credits, but earlier I did say there were a few other requirements to qualify for the reverse tax credit. And one of the disqualification factors is if your PAYE is above a certain amount. Land ownership status details, there's a requirement that if you are a landowner, you enter your land tax bill reference numbers, and you will click on the pencil that you see here and enter the relevant numbers. It's information which the Barbados Revenue Authority is requiring from this year's return. So I implore you to ensure that you have your correct land tax reference numbers so that you can enter the relevant information. There's also, in terms of persons who have unfortunately passed away, this may be a filing on behalf of their estate or a final return. You will, if that person is deceased, you do need to state the date of death. And that's by clicking, you can do that. You click the small calendar here and go to the relevant date and select that. Employment status, whether you are self-employed or not. Directorship status, whether you are a director or not. And I have here is the return, a trust return. Now, a trust is a specific type of entity that is set up with trustees, etc. The return that that type of entity files is a personal tax return. For tax purposes, it's treated like an individual, not as an individual, but like an individual. So the trust returns are filed the same way that a personal tax return is filed. They use the same return form. In terms of page 2, this is where things start to get, as I will say, exciting. For most persons, taxation is not exciting. It's my area of specialty, and I really enjoy it. So this is where things start to get exciting, and you see information coming in. Part A, income from employment and pension. Those are upfront, as they've always been, because that's the most popular information that is entered onto the return. Once your third-party information is correct, this information will be pre-populated. The years, the total amount for the year's employment income, and the taxes deducted. Now, those of you old enough to remember, there was a slip that your employer used to give you called a TD5 form, which had all the details of your basic salary, total salary, any bonuses, taxes taken out, information on housing allowances where applicable, traveling and entertainment, which were some deductions or some classifications of income in the past, those benefits, all that used to be there. That information is uploaded on a monthly basis by your employer, or in the case of pension, by the payer of your pension, and it drops in there as a total. Pension, sorry, on an individual basis, and it drops in on this part of the return as a total. Pension also drops in as a total, and that will drop in as a combination of all pensions. So there's no separation here of a private pension. Say the person was a government employee and there's a pension being paid by the Treasury Department or the Accountant General, along with NIS. All pension income is then combined in this section of the return. There's also an option for you to include additional pension income if it was not populated automatically. The danger with that, however, is if even after you file the return and someone who's paying you pension uploads, your return will be adjusted. So you need to be very careful to ensure that you do not end up with a situation where your pension income is double counted, because the tax will be calculated on that total. So if you received 10,000 from one of your private pension plans and you don't see it, check with that entity. You do not want to enter that 10,000 and then, because it may simply be that there's a challenge with their upload. And then when they upload, you will be taxed on 20,000 rather than 10. And in all fairness to you, you would only have received 10,000 in your hand. So it would not be fair for you to have to pay tax on 20,000. Again, the Barbados Revenue Authority cannot adjust that third-party upload. So it's best to ensure when you enter the information that you enter it correctly. On this page 2, and there are 12 pages, the return is made up of 12 pages online. You have allowable expenses applicable to certain types of employment income. So there's some persons who still get a traveling allowance up to $4,200 as an allowable expense. Members of the judiciary, members of the foreign service do get some allowances where they get some special deductions. There's also deduction for specially qualified individuals who work in the global sector, what we previously called the international sector, and meet certain requirements. And they would then be allowed a certain deduction, a percentage of their employment income as a deduction. And then those who receive government contract gratuity, you're only taxable on 50% of that. So therefore, if you get a deduction for 50%, it means that only 50% remains. That will then, on this page, you will have the calculation of your total employment and pension income, which you would then use going forward. Now that you don't have to calculate. It is calculated within the system, which is different. It allows for less mistakes to be made so that persons don't have to worry about this part of the calculation once the information is populated correctly. Once you go in and you get to this page, you should see the relevant information there. Page 3, there are some persons who have made contributions to a personal or private pension plan, and at certain times, you want to take that out. Sometimes there is a penalty for early removal or early refund on the pension contribution, and on this page, you can do the calculation of look at the calculation of the refund. And there is a withholding tax of 25%, and that is not a final tax. So therefore, once it goes through the rest of your calculation, that withholding tax will be seen as a prepayment, and it's likely, depending on how much you would have received and the rest of your income, the level of your income would determine whether you are refunded part of this withholding tax. That 25% rate is, as you know, higher than the 12.5% rate, which is the first rate that's applicable. So imagine if the highest rate you're taxed at is 12.5%, it's likely that you will receive a refund because there would have been an additional 12.5% of what was withheld on your behalf that would be returned to you as a refund. And as I said, I'll keep saying it, update that banking information. I'll say it over and over and over again. Now, at this point, I'll go through just the rest of the return and what you can find on certain pages of the return. You have this is page 4, you have investment and miscellaneous income from sources within Barbados, as well as those outside of Barbados. This type of income could be things like royalties, the dividends, in some cases, the refund on pension contributions, a number of different things that can come in at this point on your on your return. Some of it would have been pre-populated. Other parts of it, you would have to enter in order to ensure that that you're calculating correctly. Same thing from income from sources outside of Barbados. And I know there are persons who are resident in Barbados who receive income from outside, various things, royalties for books that they may have written, some investments that are outside that income would be paid into a Barbados bank account. And this is the section which captures that information. Page 5, Part D, income from trade, business, investments, and non-residential property is very important for self-employed persons. This is where your information goes. This is where the results of your business for the year, the income that you make, as well as the expenses that you have incurred. And there are a number of different categories that you can list there, but there's also an other category. If the particular line item doesn't properly describe the type of income or expenditure which you would have encountered during your income year. Now, where you are using, especially where you are using other, I advise persons to ensure that you have calculated it and that you can substantiate that amount. Do not look at it and say, oh, wait, I can enter anything here in other. So for example, you had $60,000 in business income for the year, and your expenses are yours, and you indicate you think, if I can get under that $25,000 threshold, I won't have to pay any taxes. So you put $35,000 in other, and you have nothing to substantiate that. You pull the number out and say, well, if I am there, I get that down to 25,000. Therefore, that's the personal allowance. It means that my assessable income would be 0, and therefore my tax payable would be 0. If the Barbados Revenue Authority happens to pull you for audit and you are found not to be able to substantiate that, in addition to penalties and interest on the reversal of on account of the reversal of the return of that expense, imagine what the calculation of the interest is. And they have a number of years that they can wait before auditing you. They can go back. If they come back 4 years later, you must be able to substantiate that. So imagine 4 years of interest at 1% per month. That in some cases can take you close, in addition to the particular penalty, that can take you close to what the tax payable is. And I can assure you, in situations like that, it is unlikely that anyone would be amenable to your appeal for clemency or a break in terms of the interest, especially the interest that is being charged. It therefore, again, asks persons to make sure that you keep your records in a safe place and ensure that you have access to them. Because if the Barbados Revenue Authority comes calling, there's not much leeway if you cannot substantiate those expenses that you have put into the particular return. Page 6 deals with electrical retrofitting and energy audits for individuals, as well as part M, which is for small businesses. Now, recently with the drive to go green, there's been incentive for those who have made the investment to get a deduction from on their tax returns, 150% for the energy audits, and then 75% for the retrofitting. So you need the cost of those, and then you can get a deduction. You will have to ensure that you can substantiate the amount, and it is tracked on an annual basis where you're allowed to carry forward, because you're allowed to take it over a period of 5 years. So it's then tracked on an annual basis as to what remains for you to be able to deduct, because you can only deduct a certain percentage per annum. The excess is then carried forward for you to be able to use on the next year's return. On page 7, part E and part F, you have income from agriculture and fisheries. Those who are in that industry can put their specific information here. Some may say, well, isn't that a trade? But there are some specific items applicable only to agriculture and fisheries. So this is separated on the return, and the relevant information for that sector is entered at that point. You then also have the total, running total, which is part F, income from trade, business, investments, agriculture and fisheries, and non-residential rent, which combines the two big areas that we have spoken to from a self-employed perspective. Part G, income from an approved cultural project, another sector which is separated, and the relevant information for this sector is entered in this part of the return. Both the income and the expenses. Same thing for the agriculture and fisheries. Both the income and expenses would be entered at that point. Page 9 is where you start to see some relief, which is where the personal allowances come in and the relevant deductions. Personal allowance for individuals is $25,000. Employed individuals, sorry. Pensioners, $45,000 from 2023. Prior to 2023, it was at $40,000. So 2022, going back a few years, it was $40,000. It's now $45,000 for pensioners above the age of 60 years old. Also, within Part H, you have the donations. This is where the donations will be deducted. This forms part of those deductions. You have those to trade unions, those to charities, etc. Those all come in to this section. There's also a line where you can enter medical expenses up to an amount of $750 that you would have incurred during the particular income year. This is for persons 40 years old and above. So those who are 39 and at the end of 2023, once you go to that return, the area will be grayed out. For those who were 40 and above, it is open for you to enter an amount up to $750 on medical expenses that you would have incurred and spent on during the income year. Also, within the personal allowances would be that deduction that I spoke to earlier about spousal allowance and filing for the spouse. That filing for the spouse doesn't mean filing on behalf of the spouse. It meant submitting the $3,000 allowance on behalf of that spouse who is basically a dependent and has not received in excess of $800 for the year. The unrelieved personal allowance is a calculation which comes about from those with business income and determines if there is an amount remaining or if they've utilized the full amount, and therefore enables them to be in a taxable position. Now, self-employed persons do not qualify for that reverse tax credit. So even if their business income is below $25,000, they do not qualify for the reverse tax credit, which I referred to earlier in the presentation. Residential rent, which is a separate item again, is accounted for on page 10 in part J, and this has special classifications and is taxed at a special rate. So where you are the owner of residence which you are renting to individuals, and that's why it's residential rent and not non-residential or / commercial, this is where you track the income and expenditure associated with your residential rental properties or property. It's the rental income you get, and then the various deductions, whether it is mortgage interest, for example, on that property. You can have repairs and maintenance, which is tends to be the largest expense on a residential property. That is captured in this area. The income, the assessable income is calculated, and then we go forward to page 11, where the income tax calculation is done, where everything comes together and it is calculated for you. This is why it is so important to ensure that the information which you are entered, that you've entered, is correct, or that has been entered on your behalf is correct. And when I say entered on your behalf, I repeat, the third-party information which was uploaded on your behalf. This is where it all comes together and your tax is calculated. Now, on that page, I don't want to say there's something peculiar which happens. There are some persons who will say, well, I see if I have a tax payable, I get to pay part in April and part in September. That's for pensioners and persons who are employed. Self-employed persons, if you have anything to pay, it must be paid in full by April 30th. So again, employees and pensioners have the option of paying half of the tax payable outstanding by April 30th, and the other half 6 months later by September 30th. Those who are self-employed and uploading in the relevant sections for trade and business investments, agricultural, the cultural project, etc., those persons will have to make all of the payment for the relevant tax remaining to be paid. The net tax payable will have to settle that on April 30th. Now, self-employed persons are required to make prepayments 3 times per year. By June 15th, by September 15th, and December 15th. And this is based on the previous years or the most recent years filing. So, for example, this year, self-employed persons who file by April 30th will see. So, for example, if you file and your tax payable for the year, not your net tax payable, but your tax payable for the entire year is $8,000, you're required to make payments of $2,000 in June, September, and December of 2024. These are payments which go towards the 2024 tax liability, which you would calculate and file and pay any excess by April 30th, 2025. These prepayments are calculated on your behalf. As soon as self-employed persons submit, those prepayments for the next year are calculated automatically. So you can go into the relevant section, you can go into that statements section within your account and see what you will have to pay by June 15th of the year, September 15th of the year, and December 15th of the particular year. There's another area on the income tax calculation on page 11. If you, as you finished and you're scrolling down, there are two items that you need to make a selection. You're asked about tax refund certificates. My advice to persons is to select no at that point, and this will be there whether you have a refund or a payable. You have to make a selection. If not, you won't be able to progress further in the return. And you're also asked if you wish to receive your refund via direct deposit. If you don't have a refund to receive, of course, you would select no. But if you have a refund to receive, you select yes, because as I said earlier, the BRA is no longer paying by check. So you need to have your bank account details updated. You select yes, and you enter bank account information here. That bank account information should match what you have done in your update taxpayer details, where you updated your bank account information. And you enter the same information there, and then you proceed onwards. This would allow you to receive your direct deposit, via direct deposit, the tax refund that you are to receive for the particular income year. So filing for 2023, ensure that you do that so that your 2023 refund can be received once the BRA issues those payments later on this year. And those payments are required to be made by the Barbados Revenue Authority within 6 months of filing. So if you filed on time, expect your refunds by October 31st of 2023. Page 12 is deemed profit from foreign currency earnings. Now, these foreign currency earnings could be business income. They could either be investment income, those types of income, and those for persons who are receiving income or earnings from outside of Barbados. So it's only applicable to those, which is a fraction of persons, I'm sure, fraction of the 243 persons that are currently on the call. There's a calculation there. You enter how much of your earnings was received from outside. Ensure you can substantiate such. And then it asks for total income. And based on the percentage, you are given a rebate of a certain amount. and therefore this would be an amount that would reduce your tax payable overall for the year, and also have an adjustment to your refund or to your net tax payable that you would have calculated on page 11. Now, that appears to be the end of my presentation. That's the end of my slides. However, once you have reached that page where you move past the deemed profit on foreign currency earnings, you get to page where if there's any supporting documentation that you want to upload to substantiate any of the details, pretty much the details of any of the numbers that you have entered in your return, you find that on the next page and you can attach it. It's electronic. So this is similar to where persons had to staple information onto those paper returns. This is where you upload scans of the relevant information. Once you go forward from that page, you get to a summary. It's a summary of everything that you would have entered. And this is where you check to make sure, a final check to make sure that everything that you entered is correct and is in the right place. Once that is done, at the bottom is that a test statement that you will be checking a box to indicate that you are filing with information to the best of your knowledge. So ensure that when you say this, that this is true, because it's effectively saying, in your opinion, the return is true and correct. If you have been found to be lying, and that can be proved, there are penalties for that. I advise persons to be honest on their tax returns, because the repercussions of not being honest are great, and it can lead to issues, not only financial penalties, there's also reputational risk. Guarantee you that it's likely that if you are found wanting on 1 year, the BRA is likely to go back to previous years within that statute of limitations to check to see that you have been operating above board and filing correctly for those periods. Dale, I think that is where I will stop at this point in time. I see that there are there's some information in the chat. I haven't opened it up as yet. I'm assuming I'm not sure how you want to handle the question and answer, whether it will be those questions in the chat or whether persons will be coming on and asking questions in the live environment.
All right, thank you so much, Jason. Let me just find out if there's anyone who has a burning question. You know, you can use the raised hand icon, but we do have a lot of comments and questions in the chat. A lot of people on the call, you know, are thankful to you, Jason, for your very comprehensive presentation. And while I don't see any hands raised, I'm going to go back and start asking some questions. We cannot get through all of these tonight, but I'm glad that you said that it's going to be recorded, so you will go back through and answer some of these questions. So this person says, the company that pays my pension is always late in posting the third-party data. Only today, after my query on Monday, did I receive an email that the data was being updated and will be available at Tamis soon. This means that updates are not being done monthly, as my friend Jason suggested should be the case. It comes across to me that this relatively recent company is new to the process. So how would you deal with a situation like that? This person called and it says it's going to be corrected. So it is the onus and responsibility is on the person who's filing the tax, or is this something that Revenue Authority gets involved in?
Well, as I said before, the Revenue Authority is not going to be able to amend this third-party information. So the person with the question has gone about it the right way and gone to their company to try to get the information. And this is why I advise persons to check during the year. So I mean, even right now in April 2024, most persons should have January and February 2024's information up. The March 2024 information is not due until the 15th of this month, which is on Monday. But so persons should be constantly checking. Now, if you are having a challenge getting this information, my advice to you is to reach out to the Barbados Revenue Authority to ask for their assistance in seeing if they can have some influence on getting the entity to upload that pension information, so that you are able to file in a timely manner. Because at the end of the day, if that pension information is not up and you don't file, the penalty and interest is going to be on you. However, if there's a recording or a record that you have tried your best and the Revenue Authority is aware, there will likely be some consideration of the fact that you did not receive the uploaded information timely, and therefore you were unable to file correctly. Now, there are times when persons say, well, go ahead and still file. But because when the pension information does drop in, it may create a tax payable, which not only then has an additional penalty for non-payment, but a penalty for there's interest as well for an outstanding amount whenever that information, that new calculation is done, because the upload has been late. So I try to say to persons, fight hard, fight very hard. It's your information that you need uploaded. Fight very hard and sound the alarm if your information is not uploaded and it's getting down to the late stage where the return filing deadline is pending.
All right, so Jason, we're gonna go to 8:30. It's now 8:16. The other question, if married but your spouse does not work or not yet has a TIN, can you leave the spouse TIN line blank?
It appears that way. It appears that way that you can. I wouldn't advise persons to, but it appears, the reality is that it appears that you can leave it blank at this point in time.
If your only source of income as a pensioner is NAS, should you file a return?
Now, as I said earlier, it is unlikely. I don't know of anyone who has received an NIS pension above the $45,000 threshold. Now, under $45,000, you are not required to file a return. However, I am not comfortable yet that if you had to go for a tax clearance, that you would automatically get that tax clearance from the BRA, because they will be showing that you have an outstanding return, and the burden of proof tends to fall in the initial stage on the taxpayer. So you would have then to prove to the officer that you're requesting the tax clearance of, to say, well, I really did not need to file a return for that period. They should process it, but it's additional time. So if you know that you may need it, I didn't say this earlier, but the average return filing should take less than 10 minutes. So if your return is a basic return, it should take you less than 10 minutes to complete the return. That 10 minutes, even if you're not required to file and you do file, there's no danger. It can save you much more than 10 minutes in the future if you need to get that tax clearance.
If you have a private pension plan which was not registered, does it appear as income if you received a lump sum?
I believe that those are still being uploaded. It's a matter of what is uploaded by the relevant institution. Yeah, so I have seen some uploads and I've seen some situations where it's not been uploaded. Yeah, it's treated as it's treated as investment income in some cases, and therefore persons end up being taxable on it.
Am I allowed to claim a depreciation expense on a residential property which is rented out as apparently provided for under Part J, line 810 of the personal income tax return form? If so, what is the percentage deduction, and is the deduction based on the net land tax property value? That is, improved value less site value equals property value.
Depreciation, tax depreciation, or wear and tear from a residential property perspective, I can't recall offhand if that deduction is permitted. It may be deducted. That depreciation may be covering other assets within the other removable assets within the property and not the property itself. My recollection is that residential rental properties are there's no deduction for depreciation on those residential properties.
I prepared my accounts for my business as an author and showed royalties from overseas as my income, with the expenses following to show either a profit or loss. If I show the royalties under other income from foreign sources on the form, then I assume I will enter the expenses only under the business section. Thus far, all my books were sold through Amazon, and therefore I have no income book sales from local sources, while all my expenses are local.
Dale, that appears to be more of a comment than a question. I don't see the question. I'm not seeing a question in it.
So when this person files, do they have, because they're saying that their expenses are local, but their income is from overseas, are there any special policies or
but there
particular
is
things
there is a place
to
for
do because
expenses
their
related
income
to
is overseas?
there is an option to enter those expenses, because it would be expenses incurred for that business. So it wouldn't be a matter, and the income is coming here, is income from outside sources, but it doesn't mean that the income isn't taxable here. The income is still subject to tax here, and therefore the expenses would be deductible once they're relevant to that income generating activity.
All right, this person says they have a small business with one employee who falls within the reverse refund category. Do I have a responsibility to enter info on their TAMIS account?
Yes, if this is reverse tax credit, and Dale had said that we weren't touching reverse tax credits, but this person managed to slip in, and that's fine. All employees' information should be uploaded for them. All of your employees, you should be uploading information for them. That way, those who are subject to tax and therefore above the 25,000 threshold, and those who are allowed to claim for the reverse tax credit who fall under that 25,000, The only way that they can be in the relevant category is if the information is uploaded on their behalf. They cannot enter employee information on their own. You need to upload it on their behalf, and it should be done on a monthly basis.
All right, where will a new company show they received a grant from outside of Barbados to start a business? Where on your form will you be able to show that information, or do you have to show that information?
Could you repeat that question for me?
Where will a new company show they received a grant from outside of Barbados to start a business?
That would be information that you would put in the attachments. If you need to put that information to support, if you put that in ahead of time, the person reviewing your return would be able to see it there, and the evidence would be there that it's the source of the income, because that would not be something that would come in via third-party upload. So that's something that you would need to substantiate.
Someone asks, what about survivor's benefit? Is that income?
I don't think survivor's benefit is taxable. Off the top of my head, survivor's benefit isn't taxable.
I use a small business contractor for my residential property that is rented. How do I obtain the information for goods and services?
They use the contractor. Yeah, so if they use the contractor, they need the contractor's TIN. The contractor should be registered with the BRA in Thomas and have a 13-digit TIN, which is unique to them. And once they have that TIN, as I said, on an annual basis after the year and before February 28th, you upload that information under goods and services. So you would upload, put in the TIN and indicate what that person has done for you and the amount that you've paid them for the particular year.
I'm confused. Mr. King said you could claim for medical expenses. I always thought it was only if I had an annual comprehensive checkup. Please clarify.
The line says medical expenses. There's no single annual, most annual comprehensive checkups don't cost $750. I am one and advise persons to get, I'm one who gets one and advise persons to do such, and mine doesn't go to that amount.
And this is going to be our last question for the evening. What about child allowance?
Child allowance has been removed for a few years now, and I can't predict, so I don't know if it will ever return. But that $1,000 per child, which child under 18 or under 23 in an educational institution, I am not sure if that is going to return at all to the tax landscape of Barbados.
Okay. All right. Well, Jason, we have about 3 minutes. Again, the persons on the call, you're very grateful for your very comprehensive presentation. What would you like to leave them with as they go about filing for April 30th and filing before that as well?
My advice is we have to file our returns and pay the relevant amounts. Understanding what it is that you are doing is very important. This is your tax return. This is not the government's tax return. Dale, your return is Dale Ford's return and not Jason King's return. So it's in Dale Ford's best interest that Dale Ford understands the information that is relevant to Dale Ford. When you hear about, and we think of Barbados as a small island state, but when persons talk about the IRS in the US. Persons shiver. The Canada Revenue Agency. Persons shiver because they say, I don't want these people to come after me. His Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the UK, same thing. The Barbados Revenue Authority is the administrator, just like the IRS, the CRA, and HMRC. But you as individuals have the option to understand what it is that you are required to do to ensure that you file your taxes correctly and timely and pay the relevant amounts on time, and also, if applicable, calculate the refund that is due to you on a timely basis.
All right, Jason King there from ICAB, the Chartered Association of Barbados. We thank you so much. We thank you for taking this time tonight. All of you seem to have benefited already from Jason's presentation. Jason, the kudos are coming in. Thanks very much, Jason. Excellent presentation, delivered simply and comprehensively. Thanks, Jason. Great and informative. And it goes on and on. And we too, at the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, we thank you for taking the time. And we hope that this will be the first of an annual presentation that we can do in collaboration with ICAB for our members and for all of Barbados as well. Because as we know, taxation is something, as Jason said, you have to stay on top of. And sometimes we get so busy with day-to-day life, we're not always aware. So these presentations are important. So on behalf of BARP, on behalf of our President Marlon Rice-Bowen, of course, on behalf of Sherilyn and Judith and Wendell who are on the call, and all the other staff at BARP, I do want to thank you again. I want to thank you, Jason. Thank ICAB. Thank you all for tuning in. I wish you a wonderful night, a safe and productive day tomorrow, Friday, and of course, a rested Saturday and Sunday as we go into next week. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. And thank you again and good night. Yes, please.
Before you do that, Orson is going to move the vote of thanks.
Okay, my apologies. Arson, go ahead.
Good evening, and I think Dale did a wonderful job just now, and I wouldn't want to keep people back and go through that all over. But let me just briefly thank Jason. He's a colleague of mine from ICAB and a friend, and I'm certain that he did a wonderful job. So the comments that Dale read from the chat, from they're right on. Let me reinforce the importance of getting your tax returns done timely and accurately. And so this could not be more timely. And I particularly want to thank ICAB for the relationship that they've developed with BARP. And I'm certain that we will be behind you to make sure that we have this relationship develop further. I'm asking on behalf of a member, ICAB, you may be able to answer this at some point in time, whether this evening's presentation, because of the quality of it, would qualify persons for CPDs. So ICAB, you might want to respond to that at the appropriate time to the membership. So let me finally thank Jason for his presentation, wonderful presentation, very informative. Let me also thank Dale for her good job of keeping us together. And I particularly want to thank the staff of BARP for facilitating this, along with our energetic President Marlon and the board for ensuring that we keep our mandate of educating our members. So I think Dale, as I said, did a very good job. So that's it from me. And let me wish all of you a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, Orson. So there you have it. Just about 7 minutes to spare. Again, good night to everybody. Jason, get some rest. I know you've been having a lot of these back-to-back meetings, and I know you've been working hard. So know that the presentation is complete. I hope that you get some rest going in tomorrow and over the weekend. So good night, everybody, and we will see you again soon with a presentation from the Barbados Association of Retired Persons. Good night.